Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and with me in the Rabbit Hole studio today is a good friend of mine and fellow content creator, Mr. Hernan Ferrer. Welcome, Hernan.
Thank you for having me here.
Hey, man, welcome to the show. I'm glad to finally get you down here.
About to say, I know it's been a while. You've been telling me for a while. It's just been hectic, but I'm glad to be here. I love the setup.
Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. I know you slept all the way down here from the top of Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
He's up in the Heights up there. So today we're going to talk about DSLRs for filmmaking. DSLRs as opposed to video cameras, as opposed to mirrorless cameras. And Hernan and I have both been DSLR shooters.
Yes, we have.
So we're going to kind of contrast, compare, talk about who they're good for, who they're not good for, what the advantages are, what the disadvantages are, and see if you should get one, if you should be using one for your type of filmmaking. But first, before we get into that, Hernan, let me just get your background. Tell me, give me your origin story. How did you get into filmmaking, and what kind of filmmaking do you do?
It's an interesting thing. I feel like I jump from different type of arts. I guess art forms is when I was younger, I actually wanted to become art. I used to draw. I actually tried to get to high school with doing a drawing competition and stuff like that, and I don't know. It's just it started with that. Then I got into poetry when I got older, and I did my poetry stuff for a bit. I got one thing published in a local bookstore and stuff like that, and I loved it. And just filmmaking just came in an odd place. It was an odd time. So at that time, I got reacquainted with my close friend and fellow partner, film partner, Aramis Martinez. We started. We went to school together. And he wanted to become an actor. We talked about, collabing. I would do some poetry and then have him do some stuff. And then we started talking about maybe writing a script together. And we wrote something and, it was just playing around. And I don't know, it kind of flowed well. So then from there, at the same time, I was actually, what's the right term? I was booking bands in local spots in LES.
You working as a promoter?
Yeah. So it's I get the bands, I'll put them in different locations and, work like that. And then the one thing that really messed us up was the fact that, we had all these shows, but we had no kind of pictures, no video, nothing to show how the night was. So one day I got really tired of just not having a camera and stuff like that. I bought a DSLR. And from there, I started messing around with pictures. And then I started doing film, video, and then I don't know, it just started growing for it. I started the love for it started growing. I started really just watching videos and tutorials. And funny enough, when I was young, I originally went to high school for media technology, but then I changed my major to psychology semester in. So then just I just found my love for just working with a camera, and really, it just came down to me just reading books, looking at YouTube tutorials, and then just working with other people and just getting, learning from them, seeing what they do, how they do everything, and just put it in my own style.
So you started out basically like an event shooter.
Yes.
And you still are to this day a hybrid shooter. You're doing video and stills.
Yes.
So what type of more fictional, you've done fictional narrative and documentary as well, or more fictional narrative in terms of shooting?
I've done more maybe docs type of work. I've done a lot more interviews than anything else. I originally wanted to do more narrative work. I feel there's more. It's not being creative doing interviews, but I think you have more space to really make something more creative in a narrative work. But quite frankly, interviews and videography pays a little bit more.
Another thing right off the top, full disclosure, we're going to talk about cameras that we own. We're both Canon shooters. We've used other brands of cameras, but this is by no means a paid or endorsed advertisement for anything that we're going to talk about. This is just the gear that we happen to be experienced with. So you're a Canon 70D?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you've been using that. You've been shooting red carpet events.
Yes.
And other type of events, and you've been doing photography with it.
Yeah.
Have you done fictional narrative movies with it?
Yes.
What type of stuff have you done? Like short films, web series?
I definitely shot a few episodes of a couple web series with it. I shot music videos with it, and there was, I think, one narrative shoot I did with it. It's a good camera.
So let's talk about because we both use other types of video cameras as well.
Yes.
I've used the Canon Cinema line. I've used a bunch of different kinds of video cameras. Recently, this year, we did a short film on the Blackmagic cinema camera. I've also worked with like the C200 and worked with the mirrorless A7S Mark II. So, but let's just talk about the DSLR for right now.
Okay.
So, what are the advantages as you see it of DSLR shooting? I know what I think about it, but what do you see as like the advantages of using a DSLR as opposed to a video camera?
There's, one thing I could say is just it's way more accessible. Like I say, for if you wanna you could buy a DSLR for maybe $400 and up. So it's very accessible.
So price point wise,
is golden. For the simple fact that if you want to get maybe let's say right now a C100 Mark II, right now brand new is $3,500.
Right.
And it's $3,500. It's something that is an investment.
To me, it's all about lenses.
Yes.
So you can you can get a Canon Rebel or an equivalent model. Not that there aren't other models out there that shoot decent video, 1080 video, and you can get good glass for it. And then if you do upgrade, you can still use that glass on a C100 or a C200. So I see that as a big advantage.
Of course. I mean, unless you need something to broadcast, which you need a good color space for that. DSLRs aren't the best choice. But if it's going straight to the web, or if you want to have it for your own personal work and it's not going to broadcast, I say this is the perfect thing to buy. It's where you made an excellent example. It's like so let's say $3,500. Now with that money, you could buy the camera, a rig, lenses, and lights. Because the whole thing about it, at the end of the day, camera is good, but you also need lights. You have to make sure you have sound equipment.
Yeah, if you're setting up a full video system and obviously everybody only has so much money. I mean, if you're listening to this show, you only have so much money. I would venture to guess that most of my listeners are not independently wealthy. But yeah, you're right. Your camera body. While you need a good camera body, but you shouldn't be going for the most expensive camera body out there. You talked about the C100. We did a review of the C200 recently. Yeah. That camera's $7,500. And if you don't have that much money to play with, you've got zero in terms of lensing. Now, DSLRs, you'll get a good image. You'll get an image that is usable, and I've even seen stuff shot with a DSLR that's been used on the big screen.
Yes.
I mentioned it in the last show or the show before. The movie A Space Program was shot by Van Neistat and Tom Sachs. His movie about his art project is a documentary type film. That was shot with a Canon T2i. There have been other I've seen shows that have been shot with a Canon 7D. Stuff that's been shot with a 5D. For my show, Watch This Film, we used a 5D Mark III. Yes. Looked great, and I've been using a Canon 80D, which is just like an upgrade from yours. Got a few different bells and whistles. But, I got to say, for a non-video camera, it shoots pretty darn good video. And you could probably do small movies with it. Yeah. I would say, small movies or a web series. I do, like, if you're looking to put something on a big screen, that's probably where you're not going to have maybe the dynamic range you want.
See, that's the whole thing. Yeah, like the dynamic range will be an issue because most DSLRs you could probably get maybe the dynamic range could range around 8 to 10, give or take.
In terms of stops.
Yeah, depending on the DSLR, but it really all depends. Like look at the movie Tangerine. That was shot on an iPhone.
What I liked about DSLRs initially was price was the biggest one. I think that's the biggest advantage right there is price. Yes. But it was the fact that you had so much control in terms of as opposed to shooting with like a phone.
Yes.
Like you're going to have control over your aperture, your ISO, your shutter speed. You're going to be able to get a filmic look and a filmic motion blur easier than you can with using Filmic Pro or something like that on your phone.
Absolutely right.
And the lenses, you can get. A Canon's cheapest lens is probably was $125, $150 for the Nifty 50.
Yeah, give or take. That one and the 24 millimeter pancake.
I think some of the other advantages are if you were a hybrid shooter, if you're a photographer and a videographer, this is this is one piece of equipment as opposed to two.
Exactly.
And you can get great images with both. I think another advantage is if you want to do stuff like time lapses. Which you and I shoot a lot of time lapses. You can definitely do that much easier with a DSLR and get some great effects.
Exactly.
And the great thing about doing time lapses is that if you're shooting them in photo mode, you're getting a much higher resolution than you even would with a video camera.
No, you're absolutely right.
You're getting because your sensor is my sensor is like 20 megapixels. When you're shooting 1080, it's like 2 megapixels.
Yeah.
So you're getting 10 times the quality in each one of these things, and it looks great. And you can put it on your reel, and it looks like a really great shot that you took with a really expensive camera. But you don't need, you don't need to spend $3,000 on a camera body. So in terms of, like what they're good for, what they're not good for, I'd say not good for. Well, you do events and stuff with them. Like you do like red carpet stuff and things like that.
I mean, it is a little bit. DSLRs can be difficult in event spaces. It really comes down to the lighting, and that's the big issue. So depending what DSLR you have, what size sensor you have, will be a big factor on how it works in the low light.
Yeah, so if you're shooting in a low light situation, it can be tricky.
Yeah, very tricky.
Also, if you're shooting long events, DSLRs have that thing where they cut out at like 29 and a half minutes or something. So, if you got somebody doing, if you're trying to shoot a play or if you're trying to shoot a musical performance that's 2 hours long, don't use a DSLR.
Don't.
The
only thing you could do, which is if you have two DSLRs, just cut one while the other one's rolling, and then cut, and then take turns cutting.
Yeah, I've done that myself. Where
that's the only way.
It's not bad as a second camera if you have a video camera that you can run consistently, and then use your DSLR for spots.
Yes.
But yeah, it's very limiting. So let's talk a little bit about DSLRs versus mirrorless.
Okay.
Now you've used which mirrorless cameras have you used?
I used the A7, A7S2.
The Sonys.
Yeah.
They're very popular right now.
Very popular.
We shot a commercial with the Sony A7S Mark II.
Okay.
Great little camera. The only thing I wasn't crazy about, it's small, it's light. Sony has great lenses. The only thing that would take me a while is the menu system.
Yes.
Diving into that Sony menu system, as opposed to, because I've been a Canon dude for so long.
You have the buttons right there,
and
dedicated buttons take you there.
But did you find any difference in terms of quality? Were you like shooting 4K with it? Because that is one advantage. Is a lot of the Canon DSLRs for the most part don't shoot 4K unless you get like a.
What the Mark IV?
The 1D. Does the Mark? Yeah, the
Mark IV and the 1D.
The 5D Mark IV and the 1DX both have 4K. But if you're buying those, you might as well be buying a C100 or a
it's like you're paying
C200.
Paying around the same price.
Right. But you wouldn't be able to do stills with those cameras. So it really depends on what you need.
Exactly.
So in terms of the differences between using the two, what did you find in terms of like ease of use, quality? And if you were gonna invest in something again, would you still stick with a Canon DSLR, or do you think you'd go mirrorless? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
This is if you look at all my stuff, I always tag Team Canon. I am that person. And I love Canon. And quite frankly, I think Canon is great. I think their camera system is one of the best ones there is. Like it's very user friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. Very the ease of use for me is huge, because a lot of times when you're shooting, even if you're shooting a fictional narrative on like a low budget, you still you're running and gunning most of the time. Like, you have to move quickly. Not that you can't do that with other camera systems, but I think the ease of use and the color science of Canon, I really appreciate. I think you get really true, and I don't really have to tweak my images that much.
Huh.
Whereas with like a Sony or a Blackmagic, like we've used the Blackmagic cinema camera and shot in completely flat, like you know, if you're using like S-Log or Cineprofile, you have to correct those images. So I would say if you're a vlogger, or if you're doing a lot of internet like vlogging or running and gunning, you might be better off with something like a Canon DSLR, just because you're going to be able to use images pretty much straight out of Canon without tweaking it that much. Whereas the Sony S-Log and stuff, it's more made to be color corrected. And if you're using a Blackmagic, that's all about color correction. All about color correction. But so you've at this point you've preferred Canon, but
I prefer Canon.
But if you were going to shoot, well, it depends on what you're going to shoot. So if you're going to shoot, because I think a lot of people out there in our audience are going to be more fictional narrative type shooters. Are they going to want to make a feature film, their first feature? They're going to want to do a short film.
Okay.
You know, would you go with something like a Sony mirrorless or a Blackmagic as opposed to a DSLR?
Blackmagic.
You go with the Blackmagic?
Blackmagic all the way.
Which camera though? The Ursa Mini or the?
Quite frankly, like even the Pocket is so powerful. The only issue I have problem with the original Pocket is the fact that it's like a Super 16 sensor. So, but that's the whole thing. Like these cameras, like when it comes down to Blackmagic and then the GH, the Panasonic GH series, these are cameras that really need to be used where the lighting is correct. You know, you have everything lit well. They're not meant for like low light situations. Now, if you have a small budget trying to get stuff going, I will probably go Sony. For the simple fact is, let's say maybe you could afford one light. Maybe you could afford, you can't afford everything. I just worked on a project with the camera and with one light. And
which camera did you use?
I used the A7S too.
Oh, so we've used that one as well. I think now, also it depends on, do you need 4K as opposed, we used 4K on this commercial because we were doing a zoom in post.
Okay.
And we didn't want to move the camera. It was a one single shot, and the whole thing was that, there's different people in front of the camera and it's zooming in at the same time. Well, we didn't have a rig to do a push in something, so we did an artificial zoom in post, and the 4K allowed us to do that.
Yes.
I like the A7S as opposed to the Blackmagic because the Blackmagic 4K cinema camera, for one thing, it doesn't have external batteries.
Yeah.
Also, it shoots on these big SSD drives, which I wasn't crazy about.
Yeah.
And beautiful image.
Yeah.
But the process of the image afterward, I wasn't crazy about, because you had to. We shot 4K RAW, so you had to run that through DaVinci to boil it, to get it down to ProRes 422 in order to put it in Final Cut and edit it. And that's another thing to consider too, is what do you like? Where's your finished product going? Like, and I would say, if you're going to, if it's going into a film festival and it's going to be projected on a big screen, you might want to consider 4K.
Yes.
But realize that your post budget is going to double if you do that, because you're going to have twice as much data to deal with. And the other thing I liked about the Sony, and now the A7S Mark II, I think is about $3,000, but the new a little under $3,000. I think the new one, the A7 that just came out, is like $2,000, and it's got really great 4K, really great autofocus. It's got a lot of nice features, and Sony's going to come out with some great glass. So I'm kind of wondering at this point what Nikon and Canon are going to do. Are they going to try to come up with something similar in terms of a 4K mirrorless camera, or are they just going to leave that for the Cineline?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
because they just came out with the M5, right?
Yeah, the M5 is mirrorless, and it does 4K, but it doesn't do 4K great. Yeah. There's a huge crop in factor, and it's a smaller sensor. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's the camera you wanna use for fictional narrative work anyway.
No, of course not.
But like the point is that I think what we're trying to say is like you can use anything really.
Yes.
Like you can use a phone, you can use an entry level DSLR, or you can use a Sony mirrorless, or you can get some of these Cine cameras. But in terms of DSLR, I think number one, if you're a hybrid shooter, if you're shooting pictures and video, great,
Yes.
definitely for you. If you don't have a big budget and you want to invest in other things like camera support systems and rigs and lights and lenses, audio equipment, if you're going to do full filmmaker package, then yes. And tell me if you disagree with any of this stuff.
Great.
And you could probably do the same thing with a mirrorless, but it's going to cost you twice as much.
Give it to you.
I think I got my camera for a little less than $1,000, and I got mine. I mean, just full disclosure as well. I got mine because I had owned Canon cameras previously, and I already had Canon glass,
Yes.
and I didn't want to invest in a whole new system. And that's definitely a question for you if you're going to jump over or not. Do you want to get? Because I don't want to shoot with adapters. Also, adapters are just as expensive as lenses.
Yeah, I mean, it's like an extra $400 or $500, even more.
Right, to use glass that you already own.
Exactly.
I think it really depends on what you and also, if you want to do stuff like time lapses. If you're a big time lapse shooter, then shooting DSLR and being able to, maybe take those if you use high quality, you can shoot raw pictures, put them into Photoshop, tweak them, and put together an amazing looking time lapse
Yes.
or a hyperlapse and lose zero quality.
That's true.
Which is great, which you can't do with a video camera. But and then but if you're an ENG shooter, or if you're doing a lot of event work, or if you're doing a lot of run and gun type work where you need an all-in-one kit, because the audio is terrible on DSLRs for the most part. I use an external recorder with mine. Do you use an external recorder?
Yes, the H1, or sometimes I just rent something else.
Yeah, so if you're like, the running and gunning is great, but you're gonna need a separate audio setup.
Yes.
The preamps are pretty terrible; they don't sound great. But this is just stuff to factor in, and you really have to. I think it's usually comes down to budget.
Comes down to budget. It comes down to what you really need and what you really want to do with it.
We're gonna wrap up here in a minute, but in terms of the projects that you've been going on, what have you leaped over to, like a GH5 or like a Panasonic or a Sony for?
So when it comes down to like the Panasonic cameras, I probably only really would use them for narrative work. Like, I feel that's one of the only like cameras, like DSLR cameras right now, that could actually be almost image wise compared to like a Red,
Right.
Or Alexa. Like, the color space is there. It's just a great camera, but it also comes down to what kind of videos you want to do. Like, if you go in narrative work, I will go for the Panasonic. If you want to do events, I'll go somewhere between Sony and Canon.
And get a video camera as opposed to a DSLR, unless you're shooting stills as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it really all depends what you want to do, because the whole thing about it is if you jump, let's say, to the C100s, to the cinema cameras, now you have a good camera, but now it's bulky in comparison.
Yeah.
People are gonna notice this camera. So if you're gonna be outside and you don't want people really, looking at you or trying to figure out what's happening, especially, we've been out in shoots where we're just shooting some stuff and then people come, even with a DSLR, and they're
Right.
like, what's going on? But now you have a bigger camera in hand.
It
draw
draws
more
attention. And if you're in New York City or any city where you're running around the city, a lighter camera, and being able to carry that and your lensing at the same time without breaking your back is huge. That's one of the reasons I got the camera I got as opposed to a bigger, bulkier camera, because I'm always schlepping, and you feel every ounce.
Yes, you do.
I mean, I literally sit there and hold lenses before I hit the road. I'm like, which one am I taking with me? Because I just don't want the extra weight.
No, I hear you.
But like, I think they're good for some things. They're not great for everything. They have, but it really comes down to how much can you afford, what are you shooting, and ultimately where is this showing?
Yes.
Yes. But if you're doing stuff for Facebook, YouTube, Instagram,
It's perfect.
Perfect.
When
you start to get to bigger screens, then you might want to look into higher resolution cameras.
Yes.
Anyway, so we got to wrap up here, but tell me, Hernan, do you have any upcoming projects?
We just finished shooting a short called S'mores. It's an interesting topic. It talks about depression, people coping with depression after a friend commits suicide.
Wow.
And the fact is, just like with everything that's happening lately, and we just finished shooting it, and we're in post right now. We just got greenlit with Steven Sparks, so we got 80% of the money, and hopefully by the end of the week we should be fully endorsed.
Fantastic. And where can people find you on the web, Hernan?
So you can find on any social media at produce_by_H.
So we're going to wrap up, but thanks for coming, and thank you for joining us. As always, you can find more episodes of this show on our website, btrp.nyc/podcast. You can also find us on all the major podcast channels, Anchor, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, etc., etc. Please like, share, subscribe, and do all that stuff that you do on the web. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Mr. Hernan Ferrer. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And for Behind the Rubber Productions, I'm Jason Godbey, and we'll see you next time.